Hi, this is Andre, and thanks for checking out Synthosophy. Synthosophy is integrating the wisdoms of history, based on fact and truth, into present culture. The roots being synthesis, history, and Sophie, as in philosophy. Sophie, the Greek root meaning wisdom, knowledge. Today, we'd like to expand upon topics we mentioned last week in the addition to chapter 29. What can we do? One statement last week was referring to Trump and his supporters. Many avid Trump supporters live in rural America. I went to one such place last month on the border with Canada. We went to see the source of the Connecticut River up in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. There are plenty of Trump signs up that way. And one thing we noticed is that the people up there are really cool and friendly. We chatted with a few in restaurants and bars, and they said they felt left behind by the rest of America. They're upset and angry, and rightfully so. They're getting screwed over and forgotten. So I can understand why they support Trump, and I respect them for that. And like I said, they're fun and decent people. Like my neighbor across the street. Also a nice guy. And an avid Trump supporter. As you can see by his Trump sign in his front lawn. He and I, we shoot the breeze while we're doing our yard work. He gave me some of his cactus to grow. He came over here to our summer party. He's a Trump supporter. He's a nice guy. The super rich that support Trump, though, I can't do the same for them. As we've been mentioning, we are presently in a very politically polarized state. And this week, I just amped up even further. A majority of Republican voters would support President Trump seeking a constitutionally prohibited third term, according to new polling from Data for Progress. And Republicans in Texas are gerrymandering its U.S. House of Representatives, with California planning to do the same in return. And Trump is taking over D.C. via the National Guard and federal law enforcement, which is legal, as D.C. is not a state and is under federal control. But now, Trump is planning on taking over Chicago because it's being overrun with crime. Here are some of his quotes. "Chicago is very dangerous. I hate to see what has happened to Chicago. Crime is out of control and rapidly getting worse. Not good. There's a shocking explosion of shootings, killings, murder, and heinous crimes of violence in Chicago." And crime in Chicago has dropped by 13% so far in 2025 compared to 2024, according to data from the Chicago Police Department, except for misdemeanor theft. Murder, down 32%. Sexual assault, down 4%. Robbery, down 34%. Assault and battery, down 13%. Burglary, down 21%. Felony theft, down 17%. Misdemeanor theft, that's the only one that went up by 2%. Motor vehicle theft, down by 26%. Overall, crime went down by 13% in Chicago. Apparently, Trump's statements are false. How unusual. Here are the 10 cities in the U.S. with the highest crime rates. I don't see Chicago in there. You know, by the way, this takeover of Chicago was unconstitutional. The federal government can only take a city over under the Insurrection Act. And I don't think there's an insurrection in Chicago. Now, regarding the Democratic Party, recall we mentioned that if President Biden had done as he originally said after taking office in 2021, that he would not be running for a second term. He may have gone down in history as one of the best presidents, but he did run for a second term and withdrew from the race on July 21st, 2024, 2.5 months before the election, and asked Kamala Harris to take his place. He may now go down as one of the worst. And now, the Democratic National Committee's audit of the 2024 presidential campaign will avoid the questions of whether President Joe Biden should have run for re-election in the first place, whether he should have exited the race earlier than he did, and whether former Vice President Kamala Harris was the right choice to replace him. Duh. That's the reason the Democratic Party lost. The public is not that stupid. Apparently the Democratic Party thinks we are. The Democratic Party right now is out of touch with reality. They're unreal, and their arrogance begets their ignorance. And that's why minority voters, Black, Hispanic, Asian, and others, a long time a staple of Democratic success, are leaving the party. They too feel left out, looked down on, and ignored by the Democratic Party. Well, let's dig a bit deeper into the present state of the Democratic Party. Recall the 1984 and 1988 presidential elections, Reagan against Mondale and Bush Sr. against Dukakis. Mondale and Dukakis both lost. Prior to the 1992 presidential election, a post-mortem analysis identified the reason why the Democrats lost those two elections. They were catering to minority groups. As stated in this book, Con Men, Conspiracies, and How America Cracked Up in the Early 1990s. Does the present situation the Democratic Party is now in sound like a repeat? Well, here's a quote from George Santayana. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Just like the Democrats are doing right now. Sounds like synthesophy to me. Integrate the wisdoms of history into present culture. Here's examples of the left catering to minority groups. LGBTQIA+. Perfectly valid topic. It won't win national elections. The New York City Democratic mayoral candidate, Zohra Mamdani, doesn't like capitalism. He was asked on CNN, do you like capitalism? Mamdani's response, no. I have many critiques of capitalism. On that interview, he explains why he doesn't like capitalism. This will not win national elections either. If Democrats want to win national elections, they're going to have to move towards the center. And as I mentioned before, we now are an extremely politically polarized society. Here's the upside-down bell curve between liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans. Huge gap between the two. Very little overlap. And as such, the far left and far right groups often harbor deep hatred towards each other. Studies on political polarization in the U.S. have shown that liberals and conservatives hold more negative views of one another than in the past. leading to increased dislike and downright hatred and portrayals of opposing party members as liars, stupid, and immoral. So given this level of polarization and downright hatred and hostility in the political system today, is it time for a centrist third party? Yeah, that'll never happen. Until it does. Contact your representatives in federal office. Tell them to move towards the center. Explain why with info presented here. Add additional reasons. And if they don't, then it's time for a centrist third party. And oh yeah, next week we'll be getting back to the remaining chapters of Synthesophy, starting with chapter 16.